All right, welcome everybody. This is VRP Catholic Media, and this is episode 4 of our series on the saints. We're going to be looking at a few saints from the month of September, and we'll also be looking at another apparition of Our Lady, just like last month. Just a little bit of house cleaning before we continue. I've been working on a book called Christ Kings, Tales of Catholic Monarchs. And it basically looks at 8 different monarchs or royalty who were Catholic kings, and just kind of gives a short bio and some of the legends about them. And I've got some really great artwork being produced for it. And hopefully you can see it here, trying to put it to the camera. This is a holy card made up of one of the images from the book of St. Wenceslaus, who we'll actually be talking about today. And if you want this particular prayer card, which is quite nice, I think it came out really well. It's got a prayer on the back here, taken from the Roman Missal. If you want one of these, if you donate $5 or more, I will send one out to you. Just share your address as well, and you'll get one of these awesome cards. I think I'm going to have one printed up as well for the other images, which is going to be Saint Stephen of Hungary, who is another saint we're going to be looking at today. And I'm not going to give them all away, but you can check out some of the links below, and you can find where to donate and kind of where to find some information about that book and when it's coming out. I've still got to get, the GoFundMe page all up and all that other stuff. So it's a work in progress. And aside from that, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe. I guess there's a bell, hit it, whatever. All that stuff helps get this out in front of more people. And that's a good thing because we're trying to evangelize and spread the Catholic faith and Catholic culture. So we're going to start off today because today actually is the feast of Our Lady of Ransom, September the 24th. It is a feast that goes back to the 13th century when Saints Peter Nolasco and Raymond of Pennafort and James, King of Aragon, they all had a vision of the Blessed Virgin in which she requested the founding of an order with the intent of ransoming Christian captives of the Mohammedans. And so, indeed, this organization was founded in the 13th century to deliver Christian captives from the Saracens. And on August 10th, 1218, King James established the order. It was a royal, military, and religious order, whereas now, in modernist times, unfortunately, that military aspect of the order has been stripped from them. Mostly, they consisted of knights. They obviously had priests as well. But a lot of knights which guarded the coasts and helped to deliver the prisoners. One of the pearls of this organization we talked about last month in our episode 3, Saint Raymond Nonatus, who ransomed himself at one point for some Christian captives, and while preaching made the Mohammedans very angry because he was getting some converts from them. So they pierced his lips and placed a padlock through his mouth, and it was shut, until eventually he was released, and then he died not too long after that, but was made a cardinal. Aside from that, the feast was extended of Our Lady of Ransom to the whole church by Innocent the 12th in the 17th century. And so Our Lady of Ransom, pray for us. One other little thing about the Mercedarian order, which is the Our Lady of Ransom, it's still active, but like I said, modernism has really struck a blow to it. It's lacking its military mission. And so, I'm not going to say anything bad, but if you look at some of their things that they're putting out now, they have a particular monk or priest who likes to play guitar and not very well, just kind of sort of a Bob Dylan kind of a thing. Anyways, the Mercedarian order, the Order of Our Lady of Ransom, was actually hit hard as well during the Spanish Civil War. And in fact, there were 19 friars who have been canonized in the Catholic Church as saints from that. The Mercedarian order puts it this way. The Spanish Civil War was a collusion of liberals, socialists, Marxists, and Masons who imposed the 1931 Constitution, which was nothing less than a frontal attack against the church and religious orders. And I highly recommend you look up General Franco and the Spanish Civil War and his fighting back against the modernist forces and Masonic forces and actually being successful. Spain isn't quite the Catholic country, it was then, but it actually held on for quite a time during, the modernist revolutions. So let's move on to our next saint, the one who I showed the holy card here of, which you can get if you make a donation of $5 or more to VRP Catholic Media. And all that goes to funding the book project of Catholic kings. So speaking of Catholic kings, Saint Wenceslaus, whose feast day is September 28th, was the Duke of Bohemia. And you probably know him pretty well from the song Good King Wenceslaus, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, Saint Cyril and Methodius are known for converting the Slavs. They went into the region of, Bohemia, sort of Hungary, and he actually, they both converted the grandparents of Saint Wenceslaus. Now, unfortunately, the father of Wenceslaus ended up marrying a pagan woman. She was baptized before the wedding, but it was really a nominal baptism. And as we'll see, she really was a pagan at heart. So the Christian upbringing of Saint Wenceslaus was really done by his grandmother, who is also a saint, Saint Ludmilla. And his grandmother Ludmilla brought him up well in the Christian faith. And she was actually made regent upon the death of King Wenceslaus' father, which was around when he was 10 years old, I believe. And so being 10, he couldn't take over the throne. And his grandmother was made regent by the request of his father. Now, this made his mother, Drahomira, really upset. She felt like she was entitled to the throne versus her mother-in-law. And what she did was she ended up having Ludmilla strangled by her own chapel veil in a church. And upon that time, Drahomira took control of the throne. Now, when Wenceslaus turned 18, some Catholic nobles rebelled, and they went to institute him back as king. And Drahomira, his mother, was banished. Now, typically someone who committed that type of intrigue and, killed the grandmother, the beloved grandmother of Wenceslaus, would probably have faced, a traitor's, fate. But the goodness of Saint Wenceslaus, he just had his mother banished, which would come back to bite him because he had a younger brother named Boleslav, and named Boleslav the Cruel is one of his titles, and instigated by his mother. He invited his brother Saint Wenceslaus to a banquet, and after which Wenceslaus went to a church. His brother Boleslav followed him and then stabbed him to death in 938. Now, some of the legends and sort of the pious tales about Wenceslaus, one that he kept his virginity intact through his whole life, and also that he didn't really have the ambition for power that his brother and his mother Drahomira did. And in fact, he gave part of his kingdom to his brother as a sign of goodwill, and this was not enough to prevent the intrigue of his brother actually killing him. But while he was king, he built churches and he supported monasteries. And it is said that with his own hands, he sowed the wheat and pressed the grapes that were used for the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Another tale about him, there was a nobleman who rebelled against him at one point. And he had his faction, and of course, Wenceslaus has his faction, and they were going to go into conflict hand to hand. And to avoid this and the big struggle, he made a request to have single-hand combat with this nobleman. And so it was accepted. But when Wenceslaus rode out, the rebelling noblemen saw two fierce angels at the side of Wenceslaus, and they said to him, "Stand down." And the nobleman did just this. He bent on his knees and he repented, and St. Wenceslaus accepted him back. Now, St. Wenceslaus is known as the patron of Hungary and Poland and Bohemia. And that pretty much sums up his life. He is a martyr of the Catholic Church, and quite an interesting life. His brother later on, not soon after, actually repented, and whether he did it because it was politically expedient or because he truly was, only God knows. But not too long after, he was declared a saint of the Catholic Church and has been known to us ever since. And in fact, one of my favorite things during Christmastide is the Mass during St. Wenceslaus's feast when they sing Good King Wenceslaus, which last year got me thinking because, well, looking into the hymn and carol itself, it's just interesting some of the discrepancies or parallels. For example, he's known as King Wenceslaus when really he was a duke, so he wasn't really a king. And this song that is sung in the Catholic Church, it wasn't written by a Catholic; it was really a Protestant song. And in fact, it wasn't a song for the winter season. It was actually from another song called Tempus Adest Floridum. I forget what that translates to, but it's about spring. And so this spring song, the tune anyways, has been adapted for Good King Wenceslaus. And just to give you an example, I'll play the old version of Good King Wenceslaus, or what the tune is based on here. Anyways, you can tell there's definitely the same tune, but they're singing about flowers and springtime. So yeah, just those are a few of the interesting things about Good King Wenceslaus. Now let's go on and move to our next saint, which is also a king and another king that's going to be featured in the upcoming book, Christ Kings, A Tale of Catholic Monarchs. And this is Saint Stephen of Hungary, whose feast was celebrated on September the 2nd. He's known as the Apostolic King of Hungary, or the Apostle of Hungary. And in fact, he was descended, or said to be descended, from the Huns. And from them were a nomadic, semi-nomadic group known as the Magyars. And the Magyars ended up settling in the area of the Danube, or what's known as Pannonia, in about, the 9th century. His parents converted, but, again, sort of a nominal conversion, or at least is said to be a nominal conversion. St. Stephen took the baptismal name. His name was Varch, or Vark, I believe. And his baptismal name was Stephen because his mother had a vision in which the martyr St. Stephen foretold that her son would convert Hungary. So thus his name, Christian name, as Stephen. Now, when Saint Stephen came to power, he wanted to establish an ecclesiastical organization in his realm. And so he sent some representatives out to the Pope, and Pope Sylvester II actually sent back the tiara, and he was crowned or coronated on Christmas Day. And this really is the institution of Hungary as we know it today. And still in Hungary, there are statues of St. Stephen, and he is largely considered the founder of modern day Hungary as a Christian nation. And an interesting thing about him is he, at a young age, was betrothed and intended to marry the Emperor Henry II's, the Holy Roman Emperor, his sister. And he is another individual who will be talked about in Catholic Kings. And just, monarchy in general, when you really start to look into it, you see a lot of connections, a lot of marrying of this person to this person, and Frankish influence over where you wouldn't expect it in Spain, and kind of vice versa. Anyways, he instituted a Christian state and a code of laws. And, to some extent, he was violent and used violence, of course. But again, you got to look at it in the context of being in the 10th century, and his people were a pagan people, a nomadic people just settling down. So they needed a harsh code of laws for a harsh group of people. And one of these codes was that for every 10 villages, they would have to support a church and a priest. And in exchange for this, Saint Stephen and his court would provide the vestments and the chalice and the different items needed to say the mass. Another code was that anyone who was not a cleric must marry. So he really wanted to spread Christian families, which just like Hungary today, I believe they have a policy of if you have 4 or more children then you essentially don't pay taxes to the government. I'm probably oversimplifying that, but that's what I've seen in the news about Hungary anyways. So he also built a basilica in dedication to Mary, and he was very dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and he declared her the patroness of Hungary. And he died in 1038, and he died actually on the day of the Great Lady, which was the title he gave to the day of the Assumption. So this shows some of the dedication that Saint Stephen himself had to the Blessed Virgin. About his holiness, he is said to have been witnessed levitating in prayer. He is also said to have gone disguised out to serve the poor on numerous occasions. And on one occasion, he ended up being robbed by a group. And he took it on the chin and kind of joked about it with, his fellow nobles. But after that point, his nobles became a little bit more concerned and forbid him from going out in disguise to serve the poor. But that didn't stop him from continuing to give alms and to support the Christianity and the monasteries and the church. He loved very much his son Emmerich, who is also a saint of the Catholic Church. And he was intended to take the throne after him, but unfortunately he died during a hunting accident. And I forget the saying, but I think he said something like God loved him so much, he had to take him, so soon, essentially something like that. And this really brought some despair to King Saint Stephen of Hungary. And there was a lot of turmoil going on internally, and especially at the death of his son, his heir, who was going to take the throne after. So there was quite a bit of fighting and back and forth, and leaning more towards paganism for a time before a rebound back to the Christian values that Saint Stephen really started to instill in his country. About his death, he is said to have a sweet odor coming from him, his body, and also that his right hand, remained incorrupt. And of course, that's symbolic, his right hand of his judgment. And of course, the hand that he gave judgment with was blessed by God and would remain incorrupt. He has a lot of saints that are around him. Like I said, his son is Saint Emmerich, but also one of his descendants is Saint Ladislaus. And in fact, he sort of gave a push for his canonization, which was eventually achieved by Pope Gregory VII, who canonized Saint Stephen of Hungary. So that pretty much sums up what I want to say about Saint Stephen. And moving on to our final saint for today. And while he wasn't quite a nobleman, I guess he kind of was. He served in the army. His name was Saint Eustace, or Saint Eustachius, but his non-baptized name was Placidus, and he lived in the 2nd century. His feast day is September 20th, and he lived in Rome, as I said, and came from an illustrious background. He had quite a bit of wealth and was known for his military valor. And one day, while out hunting, he saw a stag, and this stag, in between its antlers, its horns, there was the crucifix with our Lord on the crucifix. And astounded by that, he came back to his wife to tell her. And interestingly enough, his wife had the same vision. So his family ended up converting to the Christian faith. And interestingly, in the Missal, I have read that the mountain spot where this apparition occurred is said to have been for a time possessed by the Benedictine Abbey of Subiaco. So I guess that mountain still exists, unless it has been leveled or bulldozed in some way. But I didn't look if that Benedictine Abbey still exists. But that's interesting if that spot is still venerated as the spot of that vision of Saint Eustace. So his wife and his children, they joined the Christian militia, so to speak. And this was not looked favorably upon. And in fact, if you can kind of parallel the life of Saint Eustace with that of Job. Job had just about everything, and then it was all stripped away from him. Eustace had just about everything, but when he converted to Christianity, this cost him everything. He was forced to leave, so that way the military and the emperor wouldn't be humiliated by this conversion to Christianity. On the voyage, during his banishment, the captain of the ship, the wife of Eustace, caught his eye, and not having any money to pay, he took his wife. So his wife was taken from him, and not long after that, His sons also were taken away, and I believe he believed that one of his sons was actually killed by a bear. And as it would turn out, he would be stuck working as a laborer for a more wealthy landowner. Over time, though, the situation with the barbarians really became more than Trajan could handle. So Trajan actually called back St. Eustace, and there are legends about a party going out to search for him and, eventually finding St. Eustace. Long story short, he returns to the military. And in his conquests, he actually finds his wife again and is reunited with his children. And there's great joy at this, but it wouldn't last for long. After this expedition and the victories of St. Eustace, when he returns, Emperor Trajan requests that he give thanks to the gods, for all his success. And he refuses to do this as a Christian. So as a result, he and his family are thrown to the lions. But like many other saints, the lions do not harm St. Eustace and his family. So what is done? They are thrown into a brazen bull under Hadrian in the year 120, and they are essentially roasted alive. And that is the end of St. Eustace and his companions. Now, St. Eustace is known also as an auxiliary saint, which I've talked about one or two in previous episodes. They're celebrated as a group of 14 on July 25th, and they are petitioned to, in particular, to heal different maladies. St. Blaise, for example, healing of the throat. I wish I could remember what St. Eustace's what the devotion to him was for. Darn, I wish I remembered that. But again, we'll talk about, I think, the auxiliary saints as a group at another time. And one other thing about St. Eustace is it's easy to get him confused. And in fact, I did, at least with some of the iconography and images I was using for some videos on him. Between him and St. Hubert, who is also the patron of hunting, just as St. Eustace, because he also went out hunting and had a vision of a stag with the crucifix in between its antlers. And in fact, Hubert is the individual whose, well, his image isn't on the Jägermeister bottle, but the image of the stag with the crucifix or the cross in between it is on the bottle. And I thought that was from St. Eustace, but apparently it's attributed to St. Hubert. And I went to a Halloween, wasn't really Halloween, it was All Saints Day celebration, sort of get together at my church last year. And they had the young kids dress up as different saints and try to stump the priest. And people could guess based on the little bio they gave and what they were dressed like, what saint they might be. And one kid went up with a bow and a hat, and I was like, I knew it. This was St. Eustace, obviously, because he told a story about the stag and the crucifix. And to my surprise, it was a St. Hubert, which I wasn't familiar with at the time. So it's like, okay, what? So anyways, it's easy to mix up the two. But St. Hubert, while they have the same vision, his feast day is November 3rd. He is the patron of hunting, but sort of about his life, he was a bishop, and he was under St. Lambert, who was a bishop who was murdered in 681. And that's when Hubert took over his position in his bishopric. And he is known to have abolished the worship of idols and to have been gifted with working miracles as well. But a lot of the details of his life are obscured, same with that of Eustace for the most part, which again is why it's easy to conflate the two. But Hubert died in 727, whereas St. Eustace died in the 2nd century, 120 AD, some sources say. So that wraps up the saints I wanted to look at for September. So thank you for watching. This is VRP Catholic Media. Go ahead, click and subscribe. We have a lot of different content that I put out, mainly on BitChute. I've been trying to get into Rumble. Sometimes I use YouTube just for the live streaming. Then I take the video, add the PowerPoint stuff and some of the music to it, and sort of edit it. Not too much though. It's pretty much the same content, just with the visuals, and I post it back again and then post it other places. So yeah, but I go ahead and look at PayPal. The link's below. Again, I'm working on a book for boys and families around 8 to 12 years old, and it focuses on saints. This is some of the art from it. I'll also probably show another picture. I've got Saint Louis IX, worked out, which is pretty cool. And kind of have those accompanying holy cards go along with each one. But the cost of printing and getting the illustrations done and just the time involved, just looking to recoup the cost of this labor of passion, and hopefully it reaches a lot of people and brings joy in the faith to a lot of different individuals. And another reason I wanted to do it is because there are so many there's so few Catholic resources out there for young children. The ones that are out there are just reproductions of things that have been produced in the 40s and 50s, and that's all well and good. But honestly, to kids that have to deal with the bombardment of the era and all the stuff and lights and sounds around them, it can't compete. The illustrations are really nice, but it just doesn't have the same feel that is going to captivate them and get them to grab that book. So hopefully this book is a counter to that, especially since the modernist books that come out that are intended for children that are Catholic, the art style is just horrendous, and I wouldn't, wish my worst enemy to look on that kind of stuff. So anyways, this is VRP Catholic Media. Thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, go ahead and share this content with others. And you can find me on Gab, VRP Catholic Media. So God bless, and talk to you later.